Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Behind the Screams. I'm here with episode number 15, and I'm here with Vicky Psarakis of the Agonist. Thank you, Vicky, for joining us today.
Thanks. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And so, yeah, I'm glad that we have a chance to do this now because, I will say this whole era, this pandemic era, has allowed me to bring this back and update it. And back in 2015, when you did On Eye of Providence first came out, I remember thinking, well, if I was still doing these interviews, she'd be a great person to have on here. So now we are making it happen. So this is fun.
Yeah.
But to get it started, since the most recent thing I know you're up to is you're starting to do the Twitch live streams, and I got to see the first one earlier today. What kind of drove you to Twitch? What kind of brought you into that world?
So I've been doing a bunch of different things. Like you said, last year was, I think, a time for all of us to just sit down and think and be like, okay, what can I do? I have all this time now, with the pandemic at home, What can I do? What have I wanted to do that I couldn't before because of schedule or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
Especially for myself being on tour so much, there was a lot of things in my mind that I wanted to do for years and I just could not, So I sat down last year and I made a list of like things I would like to do, goals, stuff I would like to learn more about, to see if I want to do it. So two major things were basically to create a Patreon platform and to start streaming. Now you can stream anywhere. Like I've been streaming on Patreon, obviously. I've done, YouTube streams, Facebook, Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
bunch of different things, right? But I've seen the growth with Twitch, and I've seen a lot of my peers build a community there. And obviously, it is more gaming oriented, which I might do in the future as well. I just don't allow myself to play games too much because then I forget about the music.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've seen a lot of like streams go on there about music, and people are just like singing in front of people or commenting on stuff in front of people. And it's just like, okay, you can really just be yourself. It doesn't need to be this like overproduced, polished version of you that we so often only put out, right? Us musicians, like there has to be an album release or an official music video where it's like the best of the best. So I think a lot of musicians really tapped into that. I just want to be myself and I want to find a platform to be myself in.
Right, and I like that that's happening this way too. I've kind of noticed it building over the years. I think 2020 was kind of the culmination of a lot of this, but I've noticed more musicians are doing Patreon and doing streaming and things like that. And as a fan, it's a really great thing for me because it really is. There's more of that direct contact. You get to chat with people that you're a fan of and everything. I know growing up, it always felt like all the musicians I was a fan of were so enigmatic and like, mysterious. And now I like the fact that people are kind of going ground roots and talking to everyone directly and stuff. So
Absolutely.
And so you are doing a Patreon now too, right? You started that recently?
I started that back in August. I basically made the decision, okay, what do I want to start first? Do I want to start Patreon? Do I want to start Twitch? Because I felt like doing everything all at once would be overwhelming,
Right.
So I started first with Patreon because I felt there would be less stress getting into it. Now I am a person that stresses a lot about things because I want things to be perfect, even though I know they can't, there's no such thing.
Yeah.
But I felt, with Patreon, it's a subscription program. At least, Twitch has that too, but later on, after you make partner. Whereas Twitch is open to the world if you want it to be open to the world. So I felt with Patreon being a subscription platform, I felt that only my really biggest, closest fans would sign up, at least in the beginning. So I felt that it would be a good stepping stone of trying out ideas, because like not all ideas are great ideas. Sometimes you're going to do something and you're going to see that, okay, people weren't so interested in this. So I did the Patreon first. I have a bunch of different stuff on that platform, but the thing I was noticing that people were the happiest with were the live streams. my live streams on Patreon are a bit different than my Twitch. One was today. On Patreon, I've done like recording streams. So straight up like a couple of my covers, like the Ghostbusters cover or Protect the Land, those were recorded in on Patreon, like to a live audience. So I think they really enjoyed that because they got to see my recording process and how it's done. And also I've done like live streams of like typical Q&As, you know, like ask me anything and I'll tell you what I feel about it. So Twitch is a little bit different, but anyways, going back to Patreon, I saw the appeal in that, you know, and that was a learning experience for me. And then I thought, okay, what can I do on Twitch? What can I do that is close but not exactly the same, and I can bridge both platforms and have everyone be happy, myself included.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And how has this kind of affected the creative process within the Agonist and everything? Because of course, I know you guys already all live pretty far apart to begin with. Has it changed much now with the new era being what it is at all, or has it maintained kind of a similarity to how it was in the past?
Yeah, no, not at all. I think the only difference is, you know, we can't get together and we can't tour or anything like that
Yeah.
because we live in different cities, but we've always had that, you know, that's not anything new. And in as terms of songwriting, the last two albums have been done through computers. So that's exactly the same, you know. A song starts from one person's computer and it gets sent to another person's computer and they add to it and so on and so on. So we're still doing that. So nothing has changed in that department. I guess the only thing that changed is, you know, we thought last year we were going to spend it touring, whereas that didn't happen. So the guys started songwriting a little bit earlier than anticipated.
Right. And do you write all the lyrics for the band now? I don't recall if that's the case or not.
Majority. Like I've
Right.
told the guys, Danny and Simon have contributed lyrics in the past. So, you know, I'll tell them if you have anything that you want to share with me, feel free. And then if I like what they send, I'll put it on a song or add it to my own lyrics, basically. Um, but yeah, I'd say it's like 80%, 90% me, I guess.
Hmm. And do you generally have a melody line with the lyrics first, or like do the words come or the melody come first? How does that go?
Really depends on the song. Um, for certain songs, I listen to them right away and I have melody right away in my head. Sometimes even words come with that melody. Generally speaking, I do like thinking of both at the same time. Maybe not the exact melody, like the exact notes, but the pattern, the rhythmic pattern of it, so that I will have to make less edits on the lyrics. Because if you write the lyrics first and then you have to adjust to a different rhythm pattern, then you're going to have to chop stuff up or make them bigger, you know. So I do like doing both at the same time, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes I'll have words come to me first and I'll figure out the rhythm after, you know, or vice versa.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's interesting for me as a listener with the Agonist. I think one of the things that really stands out is that, and I was thinking this earlier today too, that there's a lot of melodic parts, vocal melodic parts, but the instruments don't really switch to a really melodic vibe as much. Like in some bands, if you listen to, you know, there's a tendency to be like, this is the heavy part instrumentally, and then this is the clean part. The Agonist, there's so many like dissonant chords and weird things going on. I'm always like, how do you know where to start, you know, finding vocal melody with a lot of this stuff? Like if I were to think of it just as an instrumental. So that's something
Yeah.
I've always found pretty neat and impressed about what you guys do. Is that something that usually
Thanks.
comes naturally, or do you have to kind of spend some time like, wow, this is like, this is some track, it's like, you know, a ton of crazy stuff going on all at once? Like how do you kind of find the melody in there? Is it ever a challenge, or?
It's been a challenge, so to speak, for some songs. Not a challenge in a sense that I sat with it over and over again and tried a bunch of different ideas and nothing worked, because I don't do that. I avoid
Mm,
that. If I don't have an idea for a song, I'll just put it on the side and revisit it at a later date. Um, like a big example of a song like that was on Eye of Providence, The Perfect Embodiment. That was a song that I got. It was one of the first three songs I got from the guys. And I heard it and I was like, I got nothing. So I put it on the side. I heard it again a month later. I tried this idea. It sounded really cheesy and mainstream rock radio in a bad way though, in my head. So I'm like, never mind, put it on the side. And the very last week in the studio, actually, while I had already recorded a bunch of other songs, I listened to it again and I got this one idea for it and on the first verse, and then that it just opened like the floodgates, I guess, to the rest of the song, and I just did the rest of the song in the same day. So I have challenges like that where it's like you can't really control inspiration and when it comes, and then there's other songs that I might hear for the very first time, and I'll have the final melody in my head right away. It's very random, like musician brain. I don't know.
Yeah. It is it's a tricky thing, but that's cool to hear about the perfect embodiment. That's one of my favorite tracks,
Oh, sweet.
really. Yeah, that's one. If I were to put in like a request for a Twitch stream someday, it'd be cool to hear that one in person, so to speak, quote unquote, because
Cool.
it's because I think that's like all melodic vocals, but it's like there's such a variety in that unto itself,
Yeah.
just within the
Yeah.
melodic vocals. So
Yeah, it's
um
all singing. No actual full on like death metal scream.
right. And I think the first time Agonist had a song like that, and I think that album actually has a couple. Like I think the what's As Above So Below does has
Yeah.
I guess that one, I guess it has some screams, but not like traditional death metal
Yeah.
screams as much. So that was a pretty cool twist as well.
Yeah.
Um but
Both.
yeah, so I
Yeah.
oh I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was gonna say both like personal favorites of mine too from that album.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Yeah, those are good ones. But I wanted to ask also, of course, about some vocal technique stuff. I know you
Sure.
so you did see the vocal range page that I had done for you,
Yeah, I
the
checked it
range
out.
planet thing. Yeah.
That was
That-
cool.
I'm glad that you liked it, because there are definitely some people, I think, that they see that and they don't really they don't particularly care for the idea. Um, I think that there's kind of a sort of a fear for some people that what we're doing is trying to say range equals quality or something, when really it's just kind of geeking out over what notes has this person sung at this point.
Right. Right.
And I
Like,
find it fun for like if I'm gonna
yeah,
if you're gonna do a cover, you can like control F and find what notes are in the song real quick and stuff like that. But
for sure. I mean, um, not all notes are equal too, you know? Like two
yeah.
people could have the exact same range and one is a great singer and the other isn't. You
Yeah.
know? Like
Oh yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, I did this stream in December where I gave my drummer Simon a vocal lesson online, so to
Oh
speak.
yeah.
It wasn't actually like, you know, a super serious vocal lesson. It was more like, okay, let's just analyze your voice and see what's going on, you know. And as a lot of guys, he has a very large range because, you know, he has a deeper voice. He's more of a baritone, but then he has like insane, he can go really high with his falsetto. So, you know, I was like on the stream, I told him, I'm like, well, you have like a larger range than me. And he was like, oh, stop it, Vicky, stop it.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, I agree with you. As I'm like for the most part self-taught when it comes to when it comes to music, I'm self-taught. But I find that it is really important to know your range and know your notes. Not for like, because I know like some people are sort of purists about that, and they're like, "Oh, I don't care what notes I sing or whatever,"
Yeah.
like, which I think is not cool. Because like, okay, if you're doing this professionally, you should know your voice when you're writing songs. Write to your voice, write to your strengths, not your weaknesses. Um, so yeah, I think it is important.
Yeah, it's fun. It's also just fun to know. I mean, there's always been so many like, kind of, I guess, urban legends about, who has what amount of octaves of range and stuff. So it's kind of fun to I guess demystify that to an extent. But for your own singing, how do you approach the kind of the gritty stuff that you do, specifically like the clean singing with distortion? Because I've always found that to be super challenging. So I'm curious how you've discovered that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most underappreciated style of vocals almost.
Yeah.
Um, it blows my mind because like that style of singing was the thing in like the 70s and the 80s. I guess because maybe full on screams weren't a thing, so maybe that was the most impressive, aggressive style of vocal, maybe.
Hmm.
Um, but it's my favorite. My favorite style of singing is that, like, especially if we're going to talk about rock and metal music, it's like all the emotion and the passion that goes through that gritty, distorted voice. While it's still like there's a note and there's a melody, it's not a full on death metal scream, you know? is my favorite. And I think that's what helped me figure out how to do it too, is just that I liked it so much. Because sometimes the thing is with vocals, because it's all in here, you don't actually see it and see what's going on. You have to like feel it. I feel like the things that you want to do with your voice, like the things that you genuinely like the most, are probably going to happen easier for you. Um, so it was just like for myself, it was just listening to vocals and musicians, singers that do that style of singing and trying to mimic it with my voice. And then I obviously did it the wrong way a few times where like my voice got scratchy. I was like, ugh,
Yeah.
like what is that? Just your vocal cords grinding there. But I realized that's not it because it didn't sound good and it didn't feel good. And then I don't know. I guess through experimentation, I discovered that you can sort of get that distortion with your soft palate. I know this is geeky and maybe people don't get it if they don't know vocals, but it's hard to explain differently, really, unless I was to give someone a vocal lesson.
Mhm. Yeah, I was wondering about that soft palate thing too. I know that's seems to be the differentiation I've heard people make about vocal distortion, because people talk about like if you put the distortion on your vocal cords, that's what
Hmm.
causes the pain. Was that
Yeah.
kind of what you were saying when you did it wrong at first? It kind of was it sort of that feeling, that sort of throat squeeze
Yes.
thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I sometimes still do, but I do it consciously, right? Because
Right. Yeah.
like they're not all vocal techniques are like super smooth on your vocal cords. But some of them are really good. Sometimes you want that grinding to happen with your vocal cords to get that ultra distortion, but it's good to pick and choose your moments. I find the soft palate distortion is mostly for your higher notes. So if you're going for a mixed voice, like let's say like Judas Priest style of singing, high up there, and you want to add distortion, that's where you do your soft palette. But if you're like singing in your mid range, it can be a little tricky. That's where you get a little bit of like your real vocal cords um, grinding in there. So just have to play it safe and know what you're doing, I guess.
Yeah. And do you have any connection with your technique from that to the harsh vocals? Is it kind of a similar mindset but turned up, or is it a different function in the throat altogether?
No, it's different altogether.
Hmm.
It's not the same. Um, the harshest that can go would be like a sing scream almost. Like
Hmm.
like the stuff I do um where would I say? Like in Vertigo where I say we go down 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 and I do like a very pushed note there with a lot of distortion. So Chester Bennington, Linkin Park, that style. That would be amped up
Hmm.
version of that. But full on like the death metal screams is a totally different thing. Totally different technique. Um yeah. Feels totally different.
Right.
It's done differently. Yeah.
And do you have how did you kind of develop the endurance with those harsh vocals? Because that's something that I found people don't talk about as often in a lot of the instructional videos I've seen. There's a lot of talk about making the sound, but like, what do you do after that, right? So how do you get to the point where you can kind of do it for extended periods of time?
Well, that would be practice, I think.
Hmm.
Even just like 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day to keep your voice in check. Because I find you're right about that. Endurance is a big thing. And that is the main thing that I lose when I'm back home and I'm not on tour. If I haven't done any like harsh vocals for like a month, I can warm up and I can get a pretty decent sound going, um, considering. But if you ask me to do it for an extended period of time, it's not possible. And I think that's probably the case with most people. Like, you can't think about it as like working out. You can't not work out for a full month and then hit the gym and expect to be where you left off.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. So yeah, I think it's just practicing, not every day, but 3, 4 times a week. Um, Even if you can't get a full session in, just do 20 minutes just to keep your voice to maintain it. And that's how you build endurance.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of I find that like for myself when I do it, there's this kind of like onset feeling when you first hit the growl, or it kind of it like feels really powerful and it kind of splats out for me, like kind of like a and then it kind of disappears into a
Yeah.
note or something.
Yeah.
And I don't know if is that do you have anything like that? Because I feel like it's kind of I'm struggling to describe the sensation, but because it's very abstract, but just like it like hits distortion hard at first and then kind of tapers off unless I work on it a bunch first. Is that kind of what you do for warming up with that, or is it vary?
Mm, I feel like for myself, when I've lost endurance, I lose the body from my scream. So it
Mm-hmm.
sounds more crackly. It sounds more like "Eh," like
Yeah.
that, which in the music and all that, will sound fine on its own. It sounds like you're dying, not in a
Yeah.
good way. um, so I think it's just body mostly that you lose. So like it's like working your diaphragm. When I've done like heavy rhythmical screaming, like fast-paced screaming, I guess that would be
Mm-hmm.
the hardest thing cuz your diaphragm is like squeezing and unsqueezing all the time. It's like contracting. So when I record songs like that or when I sing songs like that live, I feel like it's a workout, I start sweating. Um so I think it's this is another thing that not a lot of people talk about in tutorials when it comes to screaming. Like you said, they talk about how to just get that basic distortion down.
Mm-hmm.
Um but then, I've gotten students that know how to do that. And then they're like, okay, why can't I sound like, I don't know, like Corey Taylor or I don't know, some person that they admire in terms of screaming. And I'm like, it's not it's not a different kind of distortion. Like they have this like disillusion in their head that like oh, I must be doing it wrong or it must be something different. But it's not that. It's like the emotion and the attitude that you're putting behind it. And it's like how are you pronouncing your words? How is your mouth shaped? How much are you pushing your diaphragm? Like it's the stylistic, let's say, approach that is different, not your basic distortion that you have down.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. That because there
Yeah.
is, I think it's easy to think it's always technique. It's like, but it's not necessarily always that, right? It can be kind of subconscious.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. It's the same thing for singing. Like, what is emotion in singing, really? It's just the choices that you're going to make. Like, am I going to sing this note like a straight note? Am I going to add vibrato? Am I going to go right to the note or am I going to go and slide into it? Um, am I going to smile? Or
Yeah.
is it going to be dark? You know, all these things are what create emotion. And it's the same thing with screaming. Like when you start doing those variables, mind you, maybe they're not as noticeable in screaming. That's why people don't pick up on it. With singing, I think it's a lot more obvious because it's cleaner, right?
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's the same thing with screaming. All these little tweaks that you do alter your sound so much. So that's something I feel people don't talk about.
That's good to hear, though. I'm always curious to hear from someone who does it regularly because all my kind of attempts at singing have always been singing first and then screaming kind of second. And so a lot of the nuances, like you're talking about with singing, like vibrato and choices like that, would be something I might forget would be an option, really, I guess, with the screaming stuff. But
Yeah.
um, and one track I was just listening to, as One We Survive, you do like some pretty low notes towards the end of that, and then of course you go up to like the higher notes.
Oh, singing. Yeah.
Yeah, and the singing. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
switching over
Yeah.
to singing. But that sort of thing always stands out to me as interesting because I always find that, and I've heard people talk about this, vocal coaches and things, that like once you've been singing high for a while, your bottom notes are kind of disappear after a while. For that kind of a song, I don't know if you've done it live, but have you found kind of a way to bridge through that? Because that's pretty tricky sounding stuff, I would think.
Yeah, it's pretty low. On a good day, I could go even lower than that.
Hmm.
But there have been a few days live where it's like that's my very last note
Oh
that
yeah.
day, because exactly of what you said, like when your voice is really, really warmed up sometimes, and some days you wake up and it's just sitting in a higher spot. You just don't have those lows necessarily,
Hmm.
or vice versa with highs. Um, so there have been a few days where like that note is there, but it's very soft. It's not as full body sounding as you want it to sound. But I thankfully I have in a live situation I have compression going on in my in ears. So what that
Yeah.
does is it kind of like cuz my voice has huge dynamics in terms of like levels. Like I could go from a note that's here and really soft to a really pushed note the next second. So that just brings it all closer. And that helps me hear so I don't have to like keep turning my volume up and down. So it helps me control my voice a lot better for moments like that where like it's a really quiet or a really low note, and if I didn't have the compression bringing it up in my ears, I wouldn't be able to hear it.
Well, props for going for it, though. I definitely have seen people, who will skip out on the low notes when live because, well, especially if you're playing in a really loud band, it's going to be hard to tell where the note is, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, like I said, it when I was writing the song, I did contemplate it. I'm like, okay, do I want to put such a low note here? But it was one of those things where it's like, okay, this is the only note I can go to in this melody. Like the next one, I can't go to the one right next it, like I would go third up or something.
Hmm.
Um, but then like I said, on a good day, I could go even lower. So I felt like, okay, it's not like when this is your range, you're still just using this much of it. You're not trying to use the whole thing. So
Hmm.
I justified it like that in my head.
Yeah, I guess like if you know what your actual absolute lowest note is, you can kind of like as if it's a few up from that, you're like, okay, I'm still good, in that territory. But
Yeah.
and for that kind of a thing too, it's like there's sort of that register switching going on, right? Because plus once you get to the highest part, there's kind of that the break area people talk about. Is
Yeah.
that something that you found pretty natural to maneuver? And of course, everyone always talks about the break, the vocal break. How was that for you? Was that pretty natural to figure out, or was it an ongoing process?
I think once it clicked, it clicked. I can't tell you exactly when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing I struggled with the most as a vocalist was discovering my mixed voice and how to strengthen it. Up until that point, I was just pushing my chest voice as high as possible as it could go. You'll hear a lot of that on Eye of Providence. But I realized with touring that that's not a healthy thing to be doing, because when you're actually pushing your chest voice to its limits every single night, that's more damaging on your vocal cords than screaming is, when screaming is done properly, of course. Um, so, but the reason I was doing that was because like my head voice was so weak in comparison. So I'm like, I can't write this chorus melody and then on the very last note switch to my head voice and not have it like explode. Like that's just bad vocal delivery if I do something like that, you know. So I struggled a little bit with finding my mixed voice and strengthening it, but I eventually did. And then when it happened, it just kind of felt natural afterwards. Um, what helped me a lot was going for extreme higher notes to figure it out. Like, because when I was trying to figure out my mixed voice closer to where my chest voice ends, that's where it wasn't happening. Like, I wasn't getting it. But then when I went to higher notes and I said, okay, try to hit this high note, but not with a classical sound, not operatic style, that's where I figured it out a little bit. And then I was able to take it from that super high note and then bring it to a lower note, and work on
Hmm.
it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was thinking, listening to something like Dance Macabre or Macabre. I never know how to pronounce that word.
Mm-hmm.
That chorus does sound more like chest voice or like
It
bringing
is.
it all the way up, compared
Yeah, it's
to
my.
later on what you've done. I think sometimes I almost think a little bit more to Halford or something like that. There's a little bit of that head voice
Yeah.
sound comparatively.
Yeah, I don't sing that high in my chest voice anymore. I don't
Yeah.
remember. Does it? You did the analysis. I
Yeah.
don't know. It goes pretty high. It goes pretty high, but I don't do. And when I sing it live, I sing it in my mixed voice now. Just
Yeah.
better safe than sorry.
Yeah, that was definitely quite a note, I imagine, to do live. I think I remember the
Yeah.
first interview I saw with you. Someone had asked like, "What's the hardest song to do live?" And that was back in like 2015. Like, oh, I think you remember you mentioning that song particularly. I was like, yeah, I guess that would be pretty tough. Just
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
about it. Um, but having talk on the subject of live stuff, do you, now that there's been a couple albums since then and everything, do you find that you have some new favorites? Of course, it's been a little bit since we've had live shows, but what are some of your kind of favorite tracks to do back when you were doing the most recent tours and stuff with Agonist?
Oh, like song to perform live.
Yeah, favorite ones to
Um.
perform live, either for the singing of them or the audience participation or anything like that, really.
Yeah. Well, I think from the last tour that we did, because that's all I can think of. That like we only did one full tour for since Orphans came out.
Mhm.
Then pandemic, so no
Yeah.
touring. Um, I'm trying to think. I mean, in Vertigo, obviously that one's a great one to play live. It's so chaotic.
Yeah,
Um,
it is
it's
pretty crazy.
it's yeah, it's vocally demanding, but I enjoy it. So I forget about how difficult it is when I'm doing it. Um, I really liked playing Orphans as well, the self-titled song. Um, just because it's such a different song for the Agonist, and I think every time we would play that in the set, the crowd would be a little bit confused, but then they'd get into it. So it's like a slow down moment. Whereas we've always been this type of band that's like, okay, let's take our heaviest and fastest songs and play only those live.
Yeah.
And this is the first time that we played something that's not like that. So I definitely enjoyed that. Um, and what's great is that right after that song, we would play Burn It All Down, which is
All
like a
right.
huge contrast. So
Hmm.
that those two songs back to back really felt good to do.
That's cool. Yeah, those some good choices there. I think that the way that Agonist songs tend to be written, there's not a whole lot of verse chorus stuff to work off of anyhow. So it's kind of, getting through a full set of that. I'm just kind of like, wow, it's a lot of arrangements to think through as well. Is that something that the memorization part? Is that something that you kind of had to get a hold of, or did that come pretty naturally, or how does that go? Just because there's a lot of
Um,
words in some of those songs, and different parts and
yeah.
so forth.
Right. Well, thankfully, I think maybe because like you said, I write more the majority of the lyrics, they stick with me a bit more naturally.
Oh, right.
But
Yeah.
I also have this thing that like once I record a song, it's actually kind of in my head. Um, I'll forget it if I haven't heard it. You know, like a cover that I did 7 years ago, I don't remember like the structure mostly, but I remember everything else. So with originals, like very rarely will forget a part or a lyric, and if I do, it's just a brain fart in the moment, you know.
Right. Was it any different, say, with the older songs though, that you didn't write? Is it kind of, was that maybe more unusual to adjust to? Because it's a good point you make. Like if you write a song, it does kind of internalize itself with you. But for that older stuff, was that ever kind of an odd transition to make, just because a lot of words there too and everything?
Yeah, the older songs are like worse in that aspect, like
Yeah.
lyrically. There's like a lot of words and a lot of unusual words. Like I would never, as a songwriter, I wouldn't make that decision to do
Yeah.
something like that. So, it's a struggle in that sense, you know. But I think because of that and because of how much time I spent trying to learn them, which took more effort, that helped it stay in my brain.
Hmm.
Whereas maybe if the songs were easier and I just kind of learned them and I brushed them off afterwards, I would forget them from time to time. But I think I spent a good chunk of time learning them. I also, all the songs that we play live from older material, I've re recorded all the samples on them.
Oh,
So
cool.
there was a little bit of recording process in that too, you know, just recording backing tracks. So that did help.
That's pretty cool to know. Speaking of
Yeah.
backing tracks, do you do? I know some of your covers have full new backing tracks and some of them don't. For the Edge of the Blade one, was that all newly recorded, backing vocals, backing instruments, and stuff?
Well, no. That one, Epica released like their official instrumental, which
Oh, right.
has,
Yeah, I guess they did.
yeah. So I use their track, which is their track, and it also has like the choir vocals, but I added to the choir vocals and then I added all like my own like backing vocals cuz choir vocals are different, right? Choir vocals
Hmm.
are a bunch of different people. You can hear it, it's operatic, and then there's the actual backing vocals that are complementing the main melody of the song. So those weren't there. Those are built from scratch.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was wondering about like the chorus. There's that lower vocal in the backing, the time to break through that
Yeah.
part, And I was
Yeah, that part's me.
okay, good. So I didn't miscredit you in that in the
Yeah.
thread, right? But
Yeah.
and actually, on the subject of the thread and things like, or the what we sometimes call note watching,
Yeah.
there's been debates in the past about like what to do with what we sometimes call as like song spoken notes. So with a
Right.
spoken part in a song, is this representative of their range? That kind of a thing. Like you can do like a little spoken thing at the beginning of Villain that it gets very low,
Mhm.
but it's not. It's like right before the song kicks in. Do you consider that kind of thing very much separate from like a note, like vocal range type thing, or or do you think of that as because it's kind of an acted part that it fits in? What are your thoughts
Hmm.
on that kind of thing?
I mean, I think technically it is a note, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's hit in a different way, like with like subharmonics or vocal fry or something sometimes, you know. Like, I think once you tap into your vocal fry, you can reach a lot more extremes for
Yeah,
sure.
it's true.
So I think you can count it as a note, but then it's also, I feel like, is it a controlled part of your range though?
Right.
You know, so like it goes same goes for highs. Like if you credit someone for like a really high pitched scream that has a noticeable note in it, it's like, okay, were they actually trying to hit that note when they were screaming, or was it just an accident? You know.
Mm-hmm.
So it is part of your range, but if you tell the same person like, "Hey, can you do the exact same thing again?" I'm not sure if they'll be able to, you know?
Right. Yeah. It's not always something that's very planned, I suspect. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, that one's been, and also we've always had debates about, the screamed notes and like how to count those and so forth. Because like the way that we've started doing it, which you probably saw, is we'll color the note different. So and then we'll have a little key at the bottom that
Yeah.
says, hey, so this color, if it's green, that means it's a screamed note. So some people are like, oh well, screams aren't part of range, and some people will say they are. So I guess we try and please both audiences that way, just kind of
Yeah.
acknowledge it, but then say, yes, it's this kind of a note or what have you. um
Yeah.
yeah, I've never gotten a chance really to ask the singers we've done threads for about it, because a lot of times when I'm doing these, you haven't seen them, or so it's kind of fun. But uh and do you think that what we had listed was accurate? Like that C3 to C6 is to use the exact octave numbers that we have you down for at the moment.
I
Um,
was going to check it out
yeah,
actually cuz I know you sent that to me, right? Or
I
did you
think
not send it
I
to
think
me?
Adon sent it to you. I know he told me that he was
Right.
gonna
Yeah,
send that
cuz
to
I
you,
saw
but
it recently. I would have to check and see exactly what you like which parts I guess of songs you've credited. Um It's pretty accurate. I've gone like lower and higher, but only in backing tracks. Like
right.
in terms of like main vocal, I don't think I've definitely not gone lower than a C. Or wait, maybe I've gone to a B. I'm confused now. I
It could
think
be.
I
It's
think
kind of odd, yeah, the
yeah,
terminologies, but
cuz this is from a while back, right?
yeah, I want to. That's the thing. It's not a fully updated thread. I started updating it
There you
recently
go.
with some of the covers, but it's certainly
Yeah.
missing some stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
I think cuz I think in my corn cover I go a little bit lower. Because I sang it in the original key. So, but I can't tell you which note it is right now. I
yeah,
just remember that it's a little lower than a C. And the only reason I did that because it was studio, like I said, and I wouldn't
Mhm.
do that live. Um,
Right.
and then yeah, I think for higher notes, I've only put them in like backing like choir arrangements and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It's like maybe so buried in the mix that you can't hear it.
Yeah,
So
it is kind of a tricky thing to work out backing vocals sometimes, especially if a lot of people are credited or you don't know, and so we have to
yeah,
kind of err on the side of caution with that sometimes.
for
Um,
sure.
but yeah, it is a thread I'm working on updating now, because
Oh, thank
we've
you.
yeah we've taken yeah we do a lot of these, as you can imagine. So it's kind of like we realize over the years, like, oh, we could do it this way, or kind of how we format things and make it make more sense. So it helps to
Yeah,
get feedback from the singers themselves when you can, because
for sure. For
because
sure. Well,
it's
if you send me an updated version, I will happily verify it.
cool. Thank you. Um, but yeah, so moving on from that, though, I'm curious to know what the status of right now with the next Agonist release is, because I know that you said there is songwriting happening.
Mhm.
Is the goal to have a 2021 release? Is it still too early to say? What are we thinking there?
It is early to say. Like, I would only say like, yeah, for sure, if like we had the studio booked, and we were
Hmm.
recording in so and so month. But um, I think there will be something coming out in 2021. I can't tell you what that will be, because I don't even know yet. I just think from my perspective and from the guys' perspective, the band hasn't done anything really this like last year because we couldn't. So I think everyone's just itching to do something. So I think as soon as it's possible to meet up and record, something will come out of it. But I can't say like if that will be earlier 2021 or towards the end of the year, but I think definitely you can expect something to happen.
Awesome. Yeah. And on that note, I guess we can't really say anything about live stuff, obviously, because the era we're in. But
Yeah.
so you've heard some tracks back from them already, and that's kind of going too?
Yeah. I've gotten like we've been back and forth with instrumentals and just like talking about what direction we want the newer material to take and all that. I haven't started doing vocals yet just because for myself, I like to do that all at once, sort of. Not all at once, but like I don't like doing like one song now and then another song 2 months later. Like I want that cohesive sound to be there. So when it's time for me to songwrite, I try to like empty out my schedule from everything else or most things and just be like, okay, I'm focused on this. So when it reaches that point where I'm comfortable and I know we have enough songs for like an album or something, I know I'll do that. Exactly that. It's what I've
Hmm.
done with the previous albums and it works and I'm not really worried on my end. I know whatever happens will be great.
Hmm. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
looking forward to it for sure.
Thanks.
I want also, you kind of touched on it a bit earlier. Do you have any favorite warm-ups for live shows particularly, and is that any different than a studio session?
No, no different than a studio session.
Hmm.
I'll admit here at home I don't always warm up. I'm
Hmm.
lazy. Um Also cuz like, when you record you're like, okay, if I mess up one take, I'll do another one, whatever.
Yeah.
But live I think there's no going back and editing, so I think it's a little more important in a live situation to warm up. And my warm-ups they're not right now anymore. They're not singing related. I don't do scales or anything like that. I do warm ups that have mostly to do with like my body and warming up my body, like activating my diaphragm, and stuff like that. Um, yeah. So it's yeah. Like I don't know if I should say any specifics, but they're just
Yeah.
um, like I don't know, like trying to think. Lip drills are good, like stuff like
Mhm.
that, or um one that I really like that's like for your diaphragm is just going like he hey, and you just feel your diaphragm pulsing when you do that. So there that style of warm ups that I do. I don't do scales anymore. I used to do them, but I think there's no point anymore.
Yeah, I understand that. I tend myself kind of find that I like if I want to warm up or something, I'll just pick easier songs to start with and then like have them gradually get more difficult. And
Right.
yeah, a little bit of like that can always help and things like
Yeah,
that. But
for sure.
yeah, because there are some singers I know who are very much into the warming up, and also I think the classical method is like you're supposed to warm up before this amount of time before, and then warm down afterwards. Like you're supposed to like kind of undo everything you do to your voice. I've heard classically, I'm
I've
just like,
heard that
wow,
too.
it's like
Yeah.
I can't imagine. That doesn't really work when you're in a metal band, I think, because you have to go right after the show and talk to people or whatever. I'm sure pretty quickly, so
Yeah.
there's not a lot of time to be like, no, I must rest my voice. I have to
Yeah.
go and unwind the voice first for 5 minutes.
Well, I think it also depends on what you do vocally in a show.
Hmm.
Um, I think what I do is very demanding with all the different styles, and a lot of them are at 11
Yeah,
often.
that's
There's
true.
not a lot of like even my singing, I'll go for like the pushed chest voice often instead of just like a softer head voice. So I think because of that, my warm up definitely needs to be very short. I can't like every time I see a singer, and this has happened often, I've seen singers warming up for like 30 minutes before a show. I want to pull my hair out. Like, I wish I felt comfortable enough to just go tell them to stop doing that because
Yeah.
I heavily disagree with that. Like, you
Mm,
want your voice to be at its prime when you're playing the show. If you're
right.
warming up for 30 minutes beforehand, it's like, okay, that doesn't seem wise. I don't know.
Yeah, you've already used up so much of your voice at that point, right? And
Exactly.
and if you
Yeah.
have to sing for an hour afterwards, yeah, that's it's a
Yeah.
lot to do.
Yeah. So I think 10 minutes, 10 15 minutes top is all you need.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think that it seems like the going more than that is it starts to get a bit overkill.
Yeah.
Um, But yes, so wanted to thank you again for doing the interview. Before we wrap
Yes.
up, I wanted to ask, do you have a performance of yours you'd like to have showcased in our playlist? Because we have a playlist of like I'll just this is the singers I've interviewed in action, kind of a thing. Is there any
Gotcha. So
particular
like a
performance
live
you'd like?
video?
Could be live. It also could be just a studio song or a music video
Oh.
or something.
Oh, okay. I thought because he said performance, so my brain went to live right
Oh, yeah.
away,
You have
which
to
I would
like
have
find
to.
sift
Yeah, I'd
through
have to go on
bootlegs.
YouTube and search bootlegs exactly where it's like, well, I performed well, but it's from a phone and the quality sucks, you know. Um, I guess, yeah, probably something like more recent. I guess you could show like my Amaranth cover. I don't know if you checked that one out.
I've been going
Um,
through them, but I haven't gotten to that one yet. But I could definitely link it in there. Yeah.
yeah, that's one of my more demanding ones. So since this is a vocal sort of interview, I guess you could show
Mhm.
that one.
Yeah, I do know the song though, so I imagine
Oh,
it'll be
there
interesting to
you
hear
go.
you do all the I've
Yeah.
heard people describe it as the Eminem growl part or whatever, like the really fast.
Right. It's
Yeah.
pretty fast.
Yeah.
It's pretty fast. I think it was like mostly not expected from people because it was Amaranth, you know?
Mhm.
Like I think there's bands that are doing that, like, Attila. That's their
Yeah, the
thing.
motor mouth thing.
The
Yeah.
motor mouth,
Yeah.
yeah. It's nothing new, but like especially when a band comes out and you've never heard their singer do it, you're like, "Whoa, what? Where did this come from?"
Right.
Which
Yeah.
was which was also like my when I heard the song and actually the guy I covered it with, Quentin, he suggested it. I just said like, "Hey, do you want to do an Amaranth song?" And he's like, "Can we do this one?"
Yeah.
And I heard it like I woke up that morning and I saw his message cuz he's in Europe. So I saw his message and I heard the song and I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
you know. And I said, "Yeah, let's do it cuz like it's a learning experience for me too. I always want to challenge myself, especially with covers. So that was fun to do and definitely learned a lot from it.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll put that one on there. And one last thing. I just remembered the other thing I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you about. Uh, have you considered doing like a side project at any point or anything kind of in addendum to the Agonist stuff? Since obviously you do so many different kinds of singing, I figure there's more that Agonist
Yeah.
might not always have the context for. Is that something you think you might check out or look into doing?
Yeah, that's already sort of happening.
Hmm.
Cause like, okay, well, I mean, the covers are covers, right? It takes up a lot of my time, but it's not original material, so to speak. So this last year, actually, I don't know what happened. Maybe because bands stayed at home and they figured out they have time to do stuff. I don't know. I got a lot of like guest requests, so like I had to turn down a lot, but I think I accepted like 6 of them for last year. So that's like just a guest appearance, but because
Hmm.
that happened, I guess that like I don't know it was like not a stepping stone, but like, oh, maybe I should do even more of this. So I do like I am talking with a friend of mine of doing like a small EP project together. Um, we'll see what that sounds like. And then I do have another band actually that we've recorded a full album with. We did this
Hmm.
uh when did we last Christmas, so like end of 2019. Um I recorded all the vocals and we were planning on, doing music videos and stuff like that before the pandemic happened and we were thinking of releasing in 2020, but then, it just didn't make sense. So
Yeah.
we're holding on to that album and probably going to release it in 2021. We'll see. So I have that going on as well. But hey, more music is more music. I have a hard time saying no when I like
Yeah.
something and I hear something and I like it. I have a hard time saying no. And sometimes I just have to tell myself, Vicky, relax. You're like
Yeah.
one person. You need to sleep. You need to do stuff. So, for now, I'm okay. I've got all that going on, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, that sounds exciting, though. I'll be looking forward to seeing what you do with that.
Yeah.
And then, yeah. So, what is your Twitch like URL, whatever? Where can people go to kind of keep up with you nowadays?
Basically my name, Vicky Psarakis,
Hmm.
exactly as it is, spelled all at I know it's a weird name, but yeah,
Yeah.
put that together and that's it. That's my handle for everything, like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It's all just my name.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for doing the interview. It's been a real
Yeah.
good chat. And thanks to all the listeners as well. And we will, I'll get this sent to you once I get it all edited together, probably in a few
Sweet.
days, and should be
Yeah.
good to go.
Yeah, thanks. I really enjoyed this, and I'll share it when you send it over.
Awesome.
Thanks
Yeah.
for thanks for inviting me. And thanks
Yeah.
for doing the analysis on my voice. That's really cool.
Yeah. No problem. It's fun. It's fun to do. Yeah. It's fun to do.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
No problem. But all right. So you have a great day, and I'll chat with you again sometime.
Yeah, sure thing. Have a nice week. Bye
All right.
bye.
You too. Bye bye.